Okay, hi guys. Already my voice is shaking because this might be something that I put out and upload. It's even like hard to speak and say words because a part of me thinks, oh, this might actually I actually might put this out online, and I think that's ultimately the work that I have to do. The work is basically getting to a place where I'm able to just turn on the camera and just be and not have to feel like the pressure, the pressure to perform, because I already know what I want to speak about, and I feel like this is a topic that I don't even have to try because I've lived it. I've lived this experience, and this is imperfect. It's imperfect the way that I'm making this video, the way that I'm speaking right now. It's not, it might not be the most consumable, it might not be the most easy to watch, but it's something that I know very well, and it's something that I've thought about a lot and that I spoke about a lot with myself, with my friends. But I thought about it, and this actually came from a conversation I had with my friend yesterday, and he told me basically, you should make things that if I was going through the same thing, I would find this kind of video and I would use this kind of video to maybe motivate me or inspire me to kind of try to do something and make that step towards the thing that I want, because ultimately I think from a long time I really wanted friendship. I really wanted that kind of connection with others. But I believed, and I had like a fixed belief that I did not deserve it, and I think that's what I wanted to make this video about, and how I got myself from believing and being fixed in this belief of I don't deserve friendship, I don't deserve community, I don't deserve to have a circle of friends around me that I can rely on, that I can call on, to now even thinking about this is insane, but like now I have a group of friends, and my belief in related to that has completely changed. I truly believe that I deserve friends now, and that I deserve to have healthy relationships in my life, and how I went there, how I got to that place is that's what I want to give you guys today. And hi, by the way. Nice to meet you. I'm Jacob, and I don't know what I'm going to call this channel. The first thing I'm going to say is this is not my first channel, and maybe it won't be my last either, because I'm going to kind of keep doing this because this is something that I just do regardless. I've been at this for a while. This video thing, this video thing keeps coming back into my life. So I thought, let's keep going. Let's keep trying. If this is something that I want to express myself creatively with and maybe inspire, motivate some people, then why the fuck not? Why not? And I'm filming this on a Sunday. Fuck, it's a Sunday. Literally. If you guys get the meme, then you get it. If you don't, you don't. But basically, okay, calm down. First of all, calm down, Jacob. You're good. But yes, I wanted to make this video. I don't know how long this is gonna be, how long it's gonna take me, how long it's gonna take me to actually like tell you guys where I was exactly, and then how I got there. So we're just gonna kind of get into it, and there might be a bit of like brain fog, so if you are down for that, stick around. If not, then that's completely fine. But yeah, I want to kind of start off with where I was, and kind of zone in on that. And I feel like once I do that, and maybe if we relate in some sort of way, I'll be able to kind of tell you like what I did and the kind of steps I took, and maybe the kind of different like changes in mindset, changes in programming that I have had over the last, it's really been like maybe a year, but honestly, if we keep it at 100, it's been a few months, to be honest. And like I feel like these last few months for me, I've gone through a lot of changes, but I think this belief I've had about friendship and how I've formed friendships throughout my life had stayed with me. It had stayed with me for a long time, and it developed kind of in my childhood. And I think this is the case for most people. How they form relationships kind of starts with their relationship with their family, and the relationship with the family kind of influences the friendships and the different relationships that they make throughout their life, and I guess for me, the kind of relationships that I learned to make were a product of me not getting emotional validation while growing up. Now, if you can relate to this, or actually let me explain that to you, because you might not even understand what I'm saying about like emotional validation. What I mean is like basically you have parents who are there for you, and their way of showing love might be through physical material means, but it won't be they won't emotionally validate you. So they won't tell you like, oh, you did a great job, or it's a lot of basically congratulating you and accepting you when you're perfect, and then if you're anything but that, it's invalidated. Your existence, who you are as a person, is invalidated. And I feel like if you grow up with these kinds of parental figures, it's gonna influence you to form relationships where you hunt, where you search for that validation, where that is the only thing that you crave. And I think that that's exactly where I was. I felt like growing up, the kind of relationships that I learned to form were the ones where the friend that I would have, I would need them to always be there for me, to give me that validation the whole time, because I didn't have it within myself. I didn't have that sort of voice in my head telling me, oh, you're doing a good job. I constantly seeked that and wanted that from others, but I couldn't find it within myself. So yeah, in school I went through a lot of friends, a lot of friend groups, and I couldn't really find my people, for a long time, because I was unhappy with myself, because I was searching for validation, and when you're chasing after something, oh, here I go with this shit, but like, this is the truth, right? When you're chasing after something, it's gonna run away from your ass. It really is. And we're not gonna touch on manifestation and all this in this video, but this is also something I'm really interested in. But yeah, basically I was chasing it, and I think my lowest point when it comes to like friendships and making relationships was actually probably 2 or 3 years ago. I was working a job, and I had met some friends through said job, and basically this was at a time in my life where like all I wanted to do was basically escape the feelings I had in my mind. It was my little escapism era, which I think honestly it's necessary. It's necessary for you to kind of understand the limits of how far you can go with excess, I guess. But yes, and in this time I was making friends who basically were on the same wavelength as me. They just wanted to kind of go out, party, and do a lot of fun things, and I remember during this time I was doing the most. I was going out pretty much every single weekend, going to house parties, raves, all this stuff, and I got to a point where I was being self-destructive, and I was kind of letting myself, I don't know, I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't really doing any sort of work on my mental health, and it got to a point where I was just very unhappy, and yeah, even like talking about this topic, I'm kind of realizing like this part of my life, which this was like 2 years ago, I haven't like worked through it. So, so I guess that's why I'm kind of like, oh, the details are a little bit like fuzzy. Um, and I think honestly, this happens when, as a young person, you get into personal development and like working on your mental health. It's like because you're young, you think that you can just like run through a lot of these like problems and situations that have stayed with you throughout your life. But some of these things take time to heal, and you need to honor that. You need to give yourself some grace. Yes. But yeah, the fog brain is real. The fog brain is real. But basically, you get what I'm saying. I was in my going out escapism era, and at the time I had attracted the kind of people who also wanted the same thing. You know, the kind of energy I was putting out, I was basically attracting the same people, you know. But what this led me to was I got to a point where I was being self-destructive. I was being not very careful with my health, and definitely not my mental health. Like literally, like all I would want every single week would be to kind of get away from my emotions, get away from how I was feeling. And that's what those friends allowed me to do, you know, and all of us were kind of on the same page at the time, you know. But I think naturally it got to like a bad point, you know, because when you keep doing this and when you keep going down this sort of path, it gets to this sort of like boiling point, you know. And or how do the mental health gurus call it? They call it, there's some term, there's some shit that they call this. It's kind of like no, I think it's like when it gets to its like worse, that's when you like get that moment of like consciousness. And for me, it did get to like a very bad point. And I think at that moment I had that realization of, you know, I was going out, I was drinking, and I was, you know, I was living this sort of like life that, you know, we're kind of sold that in our 20s it's okay, you know. And especially because I do live in like Dublin and Ireland, where like here in Ireland, drinking culture, it's very accepted, it's very normal, you know. So it wasn't like what I was doing was out of the ordinary. Like a lot of my peers, a lot of the people I was surrounded with was doing the same. So anyways, yes, when it got to like the worst point, I had a realization that yes, I was doing all of this, and it may be the society accepted thing, but what I realized was I was learning nothing. This was the big thing for me because I realized that actually, you know, all these experiences, you know, that I would go to, I would experience, I wouldn't remember, you know. And I would feel like I was doing all of this, but I wasn't really learning. And it, you know, I kind of had this like sobering moment where I was like, is this really worth it? You know. And yeah, I started to like very slowly distance myself from these people after that. Yeah, it really did take it getting kind of very, very bad for me to have this realization that that kind of life, those kinds of people was not for me. But that's not something I'm allowing in my life anymore. And we'll get into all of this, right? Because I'm talking about a time before, but where we at right now is completely different. But at the time, like the only way I was going to change, the only way I was going to even like start to reprogram how I was thinking, how I was feeling, was it had to get bad. It had to get very, very bad for me to even start to want to change it, you know? So yeah, it did. It really did. But yeah, and like I said, I had that realization. I was like, well, Jacob, you learning nothing. You're learning absolutely nothing. You're going out with these people, these friendships, they don't really mean that much to you. They don't really mean that much to you. Like you're basically seeing these people and just really talking and having conversations with them when you drink, you know. There's no like real substance within this, you know. So I was lucky because I was able to kind of get conscious in that moment. And I feel like if I didn't, I would have kind of went down downward spiral, you know. But from there, I did start to distance myself from these people, you know, not in like a negative or hateful way. I think at the time I remember just kind of saying no to a few nights out. I think at the time they were planning like a group holiday, which was literally going to be, you know, just like partying and drinking. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just say no, you know. And this took a lot of courage at the time, you know, because like I said, like I was in this like mindset of I need to be doing this. You know, I'm like 20 something, like this is like the norm. This is what I should be doing. I should be like living my life to the fullest, living my life on the edge, you know, like. And when you're in that mindset, you get this like the FOMO, the fear of missing out. You know, you feel like, oh, but if I don't do this, if I don't do that. But for some reason, like I had that courage. And I think, yes, it was because it did get really bad for me. And I kind of had that realization that I was like, I don't want to see it get even worse. But what ended up happening after I had that courage to say no to these people was I ended up meeting somebody new. You know, I let go of these people and then someone new came into my life, you know, which is something that I wouldn't notice. I wouldn't realize how this works up until recent, literally. But it's crazy how life does this, you know, like once you let go of something that's maybe not serving you, not, you know, not good for you, like life brings something else in. And it's this constant like cycle, to be honest, you know, like we're always being presented with lessons throughout our lives. But the only thing is you're either, you know, present for these lessons or you're kind of just like chilling. And I truly feel like the lesson is always like right in front of you, and you have the choice of we're either like looking at it and we're like getting curious, or we're ignoring it. And sometimes it's okay to ignore it. Sometimes honestly, like you just need like a day to like chill out. Like we're not on our superhero mode, we're not in the like highest self, we're just kind of like, okay, you know, we're chilling. But ultimately that lesson is always going to be waiting there for you, really. And a lot of the times you see the lesson through the people you attract, you know, through the people who are in your life. People who trigger you, people who anger you, those are the ones you can learn from the most. Don't ignore them. Don't hate them, because they're teaching you something. But yeah, I lost my train of thought, and I need a little sip. But yeah, so as I was saying, so basically when I made that space in my life, for someone else to come in, they did, you know. And this happened very randomly. I'm not gonna get into the specifics or the details, because this would be a very long video. But anyways, I end up meeting someone, and this person was really important for me, because they had told me their story of going to therapy, you know, something that growing up as like Gen Z, it's something we hear about, you know, but in my experience, you know, like I grew up kind of in the countryside, in a very like rural area. So the idea of like therapy and like mental health was still kind of new. I don't really know how it is now, where like the place that I grew up, but like for me, my experience was we kind of knew that, you know, mental health and mental health crisis, like these were becoming like buzzwords and stuff, but like maybe now they're more, you know, there's more of like an importance, more of an awareness. But I hadn't been to therapy. I think at the time I was 20 or 21 when I met him. And I remember he told me his story of, you know, dealing with anxiety, depression, and going to therapy and it working, you know. And this is something that I had also dealt with, you know, not only, you know, of course I had my experiences with, see, I'm realizing you guys are going to miss so much context. Okay, but we're taking it one step at a time on this channel. But, you know, and yes, like, so anxiety, depression, these are things that I also dealt with. on top of my craving for validation. This was also something that I was really struggling with. So all of a sudden, when I made space in my life for someone else to come in, this person who had experience with therapy, who, now I was able to see like, oh, this can actually work. Here is a person who has done said thing and it worked for them, and like for me, that's what I needed, because I could see like online, I could see like a video about like, oh, how I got out of this sort of situation, or how I like improved my mental health or whatever. But it was really just having that like real life example, that experience of meeting this person that like really motivated me. And did I end up going to therapy straight away? No. It took a minute. I did end up dating this person, so we dated for a little bit, and again, this was a situation where it had to get even worse before it got better. And I think that's yeah, that was something that was happening in my life a lot at the time. I needed to let things get very bad before I was able to kind of be like wake up, so, and it did. And I remember like right before we kind of broke off the relationship, that's when I signed up for therapy, and I got myself a therapist. And that was kind of like my beginning of just like unpacking a lot of trauma, a lot of different moments and situations that had led me to that point, and I was in a very dark place at the time. I was in a very like anxious place. I think I had let go of that previous friend group I was with, and after I had found this new person who came into my life, and he had also been like, well, you're not good, we're not good together, bye. I felt very alone. And honestly, it was hard. It was very, very tough. I remember, I think that was like the most lonely I had felt in a very long time, because I didn't have a group of friends at the time at all, and I didn't really feel like even the friends that I had at the time I could talk to. I had that fixed belief that I didn't deserve these like healthy relationships, these relationships where I can like call on my friends, or like if I'm having a bad day, I can ring a friend. I said the same thing twice. It's okay. Yeah, and it was honestly like one of the best decisions I've made so far, and I've made some pretty stupid decisions, but this was one of the good ones. This was one of the ones that I was like, okay, Jacob, you doing this. Now, do you have to go to therapy to change your belief about how you make friendships, whether you deserve good friendships? Maybe that's for you, but that's the thing. This is your journey. This is your path. I'm just here telling my experience, and maybe you see something here that you're like, okay, maybe I'll try. But I think ultimately you need to go with you and your path and your journey. And this was my thing. This is what kind of got me to where I'm at right now. But going back to the story, so yes, I end up starting therapy, and yeah, the first few weeks were hard. I remember I was kind of using it as a place to just unload all of my feelings, and at the time I didn't know how to like properly like regulate my emotions, so I was just basically giving like everything on every session, and that was okay. That was what I needed at the time. But eventually, the more that I went to it, I started to kind of get more curious about these different topics, and yeah, I developed a very, very I developed an interest in psychology, and yeah, and from those like therapy sessions I was doing, I remember at one point the therapist, he brought in the word community, and this is something that this wouldn't hit until like a year and a half later type shit, you know, like, because, and still I go back to some of those sessions because a lot of the things that he said were, they really resonated, you know, and they really still ring true with me. But yeah, he mentioned the word community, and I think that was something that I started to search for, you know. So I was going to these sessions, I was starting to kind of self reflect a little bit more and work through some of these past traumas and ways of programming that I was in right now that just weren't working for me, or were just making me a little bit, or they were making me anxious, I guess, or this is hard to like put into words. Um, yeah, I guess at the time I was just sort of like becoming conscious of my programming, you know. That's what it really was, you know, because I was kind of living my life before then just thinking that things were the way they were just because, you know, I didn't believe that there were like fixed beliefs, core beliefs that I had within me that had made me into this person. I believed that confidence was something that you either have or you don't. Being able to meet new people, make new friends, that's something that you can either do or not do, you know, especially like growing up in like school, like you see the popular kids who can just easily make friends, and you know, this belief forms that maybe that's just not me, you know, maybe I'm just not that kind of like extroverted confident person. And you think this is such like a fixed thing until you start to self-reflect and think about where that belief could come from, or if it comes from anywhere, you know, and you start to get curious. But for me, that couldn't have happened if I didn't go to therapy. You know, I wouldn't have gotten that sort of tool to do that, you know. So I'm very grateful, and I was very grateful at the time because I was able to do these things very quickly through these therapy sessions, because I had realized now that, oh shit, you know, like the person that I am, the way I believe in things about myself was actually formed through experiences that for the most part I was not in control of. You know, I wasn't in control of any of these experiences, and they happened, and because of my personality, you know, and I was a sensitive kid, I still am. I'm a sensitive soul, you know, so I took a lot of these experiences in my childhood, and I really carried them with me for a long time, and they shaped who I was. And this was why I was making the kinds of friendships I was. I was attracting these kinds of people, you know, and I got that awareness, and that was very valuable to me at the time, you know. So yeah, I think I spent like 6 months doing those therapy sessions, and after that, or actually towards the end of those sessions, I started to take some small steps, which this is another buzzword that you're gonna hear so many times, and you're probably gonna like, well, you should honestly, because it does kind of, it does give me the ick, to be honest. It kind of, the phrase small steps gives me the ick, you guys. It really does, because I've heard it so many times, but it's like, it's one of those things that you need to experience it to have an appreciation for it, you know what I mean? Because all these authors, mental health gurus, people who I love, they love to use said phrase. But basically, this is how you start to change your beliefs, because you know the way you can change them is by giving yourself new experiences. You know, you can become conscious of the past, of how they formed, but then you can form new experiences and learn from these new experiences, and reprogram your energy, your frequency. So that's what I started to do. So that's what I started doing. So I like I told you guys, I was a very anxious person, a very, very anxious person. So for me, I had to start very, very small. So I think what I started with was I started going to talks and seminars around the city. So I think if you live in any sort of like capital city, bigger town, there is definitely going to be some sort of talks, seminars, basically events that you can kind of just like show up, sit, and observe. You know, you don't really have to interact with people, but if this happens, it's also okay, you know? But at the time, that was my first like small step. Was I went to I think there was like a TED talk on in Dublin that I went to, and there was another one about like some psychology topic that I was interested in at the time, and I would just go to some of these events, and that kind of gave me a new experience. You know, I was doing something where I was putting myself in a room with different kinds of people, you know, and new energies, and it was very scary, you know. And I can still think back to actually one specific moment, you know, and I think it was when I was going to that TED Talk event. I remember just feeling so out of place, like I was a complete like weirdo, like what was I doing there? I remember I waited like outside of the place for like a long time before it even started, and I left immediately after it finished because I was so scared. You know, I was scared because I didn't have that self-confidence. But I was there because I changed my belief about self-confidence. That's also what it was, because I changed my belief from that confidence was something that you're born with or not into confidence is a skill, you know. And that really changed it, you know. That was a big one, you know, because now I had the hope, and the hope was really guiding me through that situation. So from there, my next step was I wanted to try out events that were a little more interactive. So this is something I've talked about it a few times, but I want to share it with you because it really helped me. It's helped a lot of people that I know, and it still is, you know, it still exists. There is an app called Meetup, and you might have heard of it, maybe not. I know there's also like Eventbrite and a few other, like, if you live in a different country, there might be an equivalent, but basically it's an app where it kind of it puts together a lot of groups and societies happening in your city. So in Dublin, this is the like main one that you can use, and basically there's different groups and societies related to different interests. You know, there are some that are related to psychology, there's sports, hiking, anything you can pretty much imagine. It's actually out there, you know. Turns out the universe is limitless. But yeah, so there is like just like a limitless amount of whatever you can imagine, you know. There's so yeah, it really turns out there is an abundance of this stuff out there. But yeah, so I found out about this app. I can't remember if a friend, it wasn't a friend at the time, let's be real. It definitely wasn't a friend that showed me. I don't know, I think I just randomly found it. But I end up finding this group that was kind of a mix between personal development and also, I guess, making new friends. You know, it's hard to kind of pin down what this group is, and it still exists. But they would do different kinds of events related to things like kind of like open therapy sessions. They would do improv acting. They would do kind of writing sessions where you would like write different things and you would share them with each other. You do kind of exercises related to that. And yeah, I end up finding this group, and I remember the first time I showed up to this group, you guys. I need to share this story because this was so important to me at the time. You know, like I said, I was going to these like talks and seminars, and I was like, okay, what is like the next thing? You know, I've done the first small step, So I'm like, okay, let me sign up for this app. And yeah, I remember the first meetup that I attended was an open therapy session. I think that's the best way to like put it. Basically, it was an event where you would, meet up with people, and there would be different like exercises related to like personal development and talking about kind of your feelings, things you wouldn't really maybe talk about at like work and stuff, that you can talk about in this like safe space. I think I described it pretty well. Okay. So I attended this event, and I remember it was in this like very old church, and I immediately got like cult vibes. Like it gave cult, and I was like, what am I getting myself into? But I remember it was, this very old church. It was on the second floor. It was this very like old room, tons of like old books, old paintings, very just very old looking, with basically just like a circle of chairs, and I remember coming in, the kind of head of the group just like greeting me. They were very nice and like friendly, and I remember sitting down, and this took a lot of courage. This took a lot of courage, because like I said, my belief about myself at the time was that I couldn't make friends, that I wasn't a good conversationalist, that I wasn't, someone who deserved to make new friends. And I believed that I was someone who would find it hard to make friends, that it was like a difficult thing for me to do. And yet I was at a place where I'm meeting strangers now, I'm meeting people I could potentially be friends with. So this at the time, this was a big leap of faith for me. So I remember sitting down on the chair, and I think the first exercise and thinking about this now is so funny. But the first exercise was literally like, introduce yourself. And I remember I was shaking. I was so scared for this, because well, actually you don't, hence why we're making this video and we're meeting in this setting. But yeah, I was so I was really nervous, but I think it was to introduce yourself and to say a fun fact about you, so something very simple. But I remember, because we were sitting in a circle, and I had happened to sit, I think, right beside the head of the group, it went, basically the introducing yourself part, it went the other way of the circle, which meant that I would have to go last. So you guys, not only was I doing this thing that was very difficult already, I had that anticipation and that like that build up to it. So I remember this moment where everyone was introducing themselves and saying the fun fact, and it went to another person, and as it went through these people, I remember just my anxiety and my just fear just increasing. Like I didn't think I could do it. I was literally like shaking in the chair, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to let any words out, and then it was the person before me that went, and then it was my turn. And in this little moment, something happened. So so it went from them to me, and when it went to me, I was like, I it literally felt like I was going to throw up. Like I didn't think I was going to be able to say anything, but then something just switches, and I just say it. I say what I wanted to say, and it came out of nowhere. It came out of a place that I was so unaware of that even existed within me, and I remember saying, hi, I'm Jacob, and a fun fact about me is that I don't know how to read the time. This is what I said. I was like, I don't know how to read like an analog clock. This is how Gen Z I am, you know? and and yeah, it was really funny, you know. And I was like, where did this come out of? You know, like I was so nervous. I was so just anxious about it, and then all of a sudden I did it, you know. I was like, I just said what I wanted to say, you know. And I had that moment where I was like, wait, hold on, what's going on here? And yeah, and then throughout the event, I was feeling different things, but ultimately I was like, oh, this was the next step, you know. I did something I was scared of, and I think in this instant I got the first taste of the feeling you get when you do something that you're scared of, but you know it's meant for you. And this is one of the best feelings I've experienced in life, period. Like, honestly. And I've had moments like these a lot, you know. And and every time that I'm like, I want to do something but I'm scared, I remind myself of how amazing it feels when you just do it, you know. It is really, in my opinion, one of my favorite feelings, one of the best feelings. Because in my opinion, if you desire something, it means that a part of you believes you already did it. You know, a part of you believes that you could do it and that you've done it, that you've been doing it. Like, you wouldn't desire it if you didn't have an idea, a vision of you going for this and doing this, you know? But yeah, so that was like my next step, you know. And I think through this experience, I was like, here's some hope. Here's some more hope, you know. Like, I was able to, you know, be a little bit more open with some strangers. You know, maybe I'm gonna meet some like new friends through this. Yeah, you know, because I had these fixed beliefs about friendship and how I made friends throughout life, but also at the same time I've always had that desire of having friends and being part of a community. I think this is something that I think it goes back to, you know, human needs, our need to feel connected, to feel heard and understood as humans, as the species, you know. I think that's very natural and it's part of life, you know. So for me to feel that desire was completely natural, and for you as well. Like, you want this because it's literally part of who we are as a species, you know. So don't feel like these desires are too much to ask for. They're literally part of your humanity, part of who you are, you know. Yeah. Okay, let me sip to that one. Cheers. So yeah, I was like, okay, this was definitely the next step, you know, because of this feeling that I had unlocked. But I was like, okay, so what now, you know, like, where are we going next from here? So for me, last summer, so summer of 2024, I spent basically that whole summer going to these meetup events, you know, and meeting people through there. And this really helped me. It helped me along my journey because I was able to not only meet some friends through that, but I was also working on my mental health, you know, because like I mentioned before, this group was and is focused on like personal development, as well as, you know, forming connections with people, you know. That's why I think I would really recommend it. So I'm hoping around the world, wherever you are, you have an equivalent. And if there isn't, then maybe you should make it. Maybe you should start it. And honestly, I think you can do this through the Meetup app. You can literally like set up your own group, you know. So if you have that passion, if you have that little fire in you, do it. But yes. So like I said, I spent some time going to these meetups, you know, and I really enjoyed it. I had a whole summer of these different events where I would try out new things that at first would scare me, and then I would still do it, and I end up getting better at them. I would do improv acting, I would do the writing meetups as well, like just different things that were fun to me at the time, and I'm really happy that I was able to have those experiences, and I developed new skills. I was starting to develop my confidence. I was starting to develop the confidence of being vulnerable in front of strangers. And this is something that, as someone who grew up with a lot of fear and a lot of feeling like they have to kind of protect themselves, that's not something that I was programmed to do. But through this, I also developed that kind of skill. So yeah, I was unlocking all these extra abilities that I didn't even know I would, so this was great. However, so I was going to these meetups, and like I said, I had made some friends, people who I would kind of talk to in these groups, but not so much outside of the groups, and I kept this word community in my mind for a long time. It really stuck with me, and I kept asking myself, like, is this community to me, or is this something else? And I think it was at the start of this year where I started to realize that those meetup groups didn't really align with what I envisioned for myself as community. I still had that desire to have friends that I could, call up on, that I could, just feel this like lightheartedness with, but I think I still had some beliefs left over. Now I was going to these meetups, so now my new belief was, oh, I can have a friend group, but only in this designated time. I won't be able to have this outside of that, and I was like, this doesn't align with what I want community to be like for me in my life, so I went to searching again, and I got a little more curious as to what I could do. So while I was attending these meetup events, I had also seen that there was an LGBT group in Dublin. This was something that I had seen, and I was like, oh, that's cool. It's part of who I am, my identity. But maybe this is not for me, because for me at the time, the way I saw the LGBT community was, if I was to be part of this, it would lead to going back to the old beliefs, the old lifestyle of escapism, drinking, partying. So I was scared of it, and I don't know, but I still was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And especially because the group that I found ended up being it was like a cafe group, so it was nothing to do with like drinking and partying. But I was so scared. Yeah, like at the time I had these like thoughts of like, oh, are these people gonna accept me? Will they think that I'm like weird or different? Especially because I had went down a path of like spirituality, healing, like all these, personal development meetups and stuff. So I still had this belief in myself that I was this outsider, which I think, yeah, that was something that I held on to for a long time as well. But yeah, I kept in the back of my mind this group for a long time, and I remember when I did start getting these realizations about, oh, maybe I'm not feeling this sense of community. I thought about that group, and I was like, for some reason, I'm feeling something towards this right now. I'm feeling some sort of connection to it. I'm scared of it. But I'm enticed at the same time. Because like I said, it's part of my identity. And I think one weekend I was like, fuck it, let me just do it, let me just try it out. And I remember going there, doing my same little circling the block situation. This is something that I would do a lot, and I think if you have experienced anxiety before, that's something you can relate with. Circling the streets, like procrastinating, very much related to anxiety, I think. But yeah, so I end up showing up, and yeah, this was another sort of leap of fate moment for me, where I was like, I'm just gonna have to like dive head first into this. Like there's no going back, there's no holding back, because now I'm going into a place where there's queer people who, I viewed as people who, maybe they accept themselves more, they have more self-confidence. So I was like, I have to, just let go of some things before I go in there. And I found this very hard to do, because of course it was going to be my first time, and I wasn't really giving myself a lot of grace as well in that moment. I was like, you have to be this kind of person, you have to be likable, you have to mold yourself into this like likable version. So I showed up, and I showed up as this version. I showed up as this this likable version, but I still showed up, and I think that's so important, and especially if you do struggle with anxiety, like if you have to protect yourself, if you have to, put on a persona, put on a character to do something that is out of your comfort zone, and I'm being very specific with this because that's important, to do something that is out of your comfort zone, you're putting on this personality, that is okay, that is completely fine, because you're still doing said thing, and eventually you'll be able to kind of pull those layers back and like show up as your full self more. But that takes time, that takes some work, and yeah, and that's exactly what I did. I showed up as this, very likable version. And one thing about Jacob is he's very good at making himself likable, very good at this. And yeah, I was charming, I was, just being very nice to everyone, very open. And yeah, this was a really cool experience because I was around people who I felt like I deeply related to, and we've had a lot of similar experiences. And I was like, this is really interesting, because the meetups I was going to before, yes, I did feel like I related to these people, but, they were from different backgrounds, different life experiences. And I think the queer experience, the gay experience is, it always is going to be different, maybe in 100 years, 200 years, it's going to be just completely normal and people won't even bat an eyelash. But yeah, showing up to that group and finding that community that already existed there, was very important for me, and it changed a lot of beliefs. It sure did. Yeah. So I showed up there that first time. I enjoyed it. And I kept showing up, And one thing about this meetup as well is it's a weekly thing, and I think that has also been very beneficial because it being on a weekly basis, you can form connections, more deeper connections, in my opinion. Like the meetups that I was going to before were kind of sporadic. They were kind of spread out. You kind of just show up whenever, and that was that, But with this one, it was weekly, so you kind of just have that like ability to form these relationships and feel like you can kind of get to know people because you're gonna potentially see them next week. So I think it was maybe like the third or fourth week that I showed up. I remember I sat across this one guy and we end up bonding very quickly. We were both kind of into psychology, into a lot of like, deeper topics, so we end up talking, and then another person joins the conversation, and we also get to talking, and the three of us kind of form this little like trio. We end up, seeing each other on a weekly basis, and eventually forming this sort of like little like group. And it all happened so naturally for me, you know, and I think that is also what I want to say to you is like, once you take those steps, and in whatever way you take them, like these things will, they will just fall into place, you know. And like I mentioned earlier in this video, like once you let go of one thing, something completely else is going to come into your life. And that thing that comes into your life will be based on your energy, your frequency, you know, and which dial it back, Jacob. We're not gonna see, this is my first video, so I can't be coming in with energy and frequency unless you're like into spiritualism, like you'll get what I'm saying. But let me simplify it. So once you let go of something, the next things that you attract is based on what you believe about yourself to be true, what you know to be true. That is what I mean. What you know to be true about yourself, that's who you're going to attract, you know, because that is essentially the sort of energy, the sort of personality you're putting out. And it's going to just filter basically the people that align with that, you know. And because I took that leap of faith, I was able to kind of shift my energy very quickly. And I think that's what makes these leaps of faith very beneficial, because they're it's like almost the opposite of letting something get to as bad as it can get before you change it. It's like you're almost like ahead of it. You're like, you just kind of fall off the cliff, and you just have to trust in it. But in doing that, you step into a new energy where you can attract new people. And that's exactly what has happened to me. And I think this is something that is going to continue happening in my life. And I'm in kind of acceptance of this kind of cycle where, you know, once you change your energy, you attract new people. You know, some people might leave your life and new people will come in. And it is it's fascinating for me, you know, and maybe it's fascinating for you as well. And if it is, and if you've made it this far, then I think we're becoming friendly. We might not be friends yet, but we're friendly, you know. Yes, I am definitely someone who likes to look beyond the veil of reality. Like, I really like to see how these programs, these systems work in our lives that shape us, you know. And I think with this story, I did this, you know, I went from having that belief of I don't deserve to have real friendship, have community, to then taking these leaps of faith. And then here we are now, you know. Now it's been a few months since I joined this group, and now I have a friend group. I'm constantly making new friends. I believe that I'm good at making friends. I deserve healthy friendship. I deserve to be taken care of. I deserve to be loved by others, you know. And yeah, you know, I'm really grateful and I'm really happy to be in this place, you know, and I want to just keep going, you know. I want to keep going. And now that I've gotten here, I'm like, well, why not share it with you, you know? Why not share this with you? Because I think if I can give you that encouragement to take these leaps of faith in your life or inspire you, then that would be that would be nice. So yeah. But yeah, you know, and yeah, and I really truly want to end this video and every video that I make with some gratitude. So yes, I am grateful for this moment right now, this video, and the people in my life, the people who love me, the people who hate me. I love you all. I'm grateful for me, for showing up, for my family, and for all these experiences that are happening in my life, you know, because of courage, because of, you know, leaps of faith. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.